I used to think I was lucky. Not in a lottery winning, miracle happens kind of way, but in that quiet, low-stakes kind of lucky where you find a group of people who make life feel survivable, bearable, sometimes even good. That wasn't always the case. I used to be the awkward one growing up, the person who always took too long to respond, constantly second-guessing whether I was actually part of the conversation or just tolerated. I didn't have a real friend until college, and even then, I spent most of my time wondering if people were just being polite. But then I met James. He was the opposite of me, loud, shameless, hilarious. The kind of guy who could crash a stranger's wedding and end up with an invitation to Thanksgiving. We met at a job we both hated, and I think he liked that I didn't try to compete with him for attention. He talked. I listened. Somehow that worked. He brought me into his circle, friends from his hometown, people he'd collected from old jobs, his cousin's roommate's girlfriend. That kind of crew. At first, I just hung around the edges, laughing when they laughed, nodding when I wasn't sure what was funny. But they kept inviting me back, kept texting, kept showing up. And then came Natalie. She joined the group about a year after I did. Smart, quiet, always watching the room before she said anything. I liked that. She didn't force herself into conversations, she waited until she had something real to say. We talked one night on the patio at James's place, just us, wine in plastic cups, late summer air. I told her how I used to hate parties because I never knew when it was okay to leave. She smiled and said, "We can leave now if you want." That was it. We were together from that night on. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safe. She got me. She knew I could spiral sometimes, especially when I felt like I was too much or not enough. She'd talk me down, say the right things. "You're safe," she'd whisper, holding my hand during my worst panic attack. "No one here wants to hurt you." I believed her. I believed all of them. By the time my birthday rolled around this year, I honestly forgot to even expect anything. I've never been big on birthdays, too much pressure to be happy on command. I told James the first was keeping it low-key. Just a movie night maybe, or dinner if Natalie was up for it. The night before, James texted me, "Don't make plans for tomorrow. We got something." I asked, "Something like what?" He just replied with a winking emoji. I didn't think much of it. I figured worst case, it'd be a bar tab I couldn't afford. Best case, a night with the people I trusted most. Funny how trust works. You don't realize how deep it goes until it's already rotting from the inside. I showed up thinking it was just dinner. James told me to meet them at this little venue downtown, a converted loft with string lights, exposed brick, the kind of place you'd rent for a rehearsal dinner or a small wedding. I remember feeling a little out of place just walking in. I wasn't even dressed for a party, jeans and a button-down I hadn't ironed. I almost turned around and went home. But then I opened the door and they all jumped out from behind the bar yelling, "Surprise!" I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the stupid bottle of wine I'd brought. But I smiled, because that's what you do when people scream, "Surprise," and clap like you're a soldier returning from war. James ran up and hugged me, hard, and Natalie kissed my cheek and told me, "You looked so confused." It was adorable. For a moment, I felt it, that rare, disorienting warmth that comes from being seen, celebrated. There was a banner with my name on it. A cake shaped like a book I'd been obsessed with in college. They even had my favorite beer, which nobody else ever drinks because it's too bitter. Natalie must have brought it. It was thoughtful. It really was. There were maybe 20 people there. Friends from work, James's crew, a couple of people I barely recognized but had met at other hangouts. Everyone was in a good mood. Music was playing, drinks were flowing. Natalie had even put together a little photo wall, pictures of me with the group over the years. Me and James at a baseball game. Me and her at a vineyard last fall. Me asleep on someone's couch with a slice of pizza in my hand. The energy was good. At first. Then James tapped a fork against his beer bottle and said, all right. Before we get too wasted, roast time." People cheered. Someone shouted, "You're going down, birthday boy." I laughed because that's what you do. But something in my gut tensed. I didn't even know we were doing a roast. No one mentioned it. No heads up. No chance to mentally prepare. James stepped up first. He stood in front of the little faux stage area they'd set up and took a sip of his drink before launching into a monologue. It started off light, joking about how I take forever to text back, how I use semicolons in group chats like I'm writing a novel. People laughed. I laughed too. I could take that. Then he told a story about the time I bombed a job interview so badly, I called him from the parking lot crying. I hadn't even remembered telling him that. But apparently, he'd been saving it. Bro sounded like he just watched Old Yeller, James said, grinning. I was like, damn, should I call HR or a therapist? The room exploded in laughter. I smiled. I even chuckled. But I remember my ears getting hot. The kind of heat that creeps up when you're trying not to show that something stung. That was a bad day. A really bad day. I had called him because I was spiraling and didn't trust myself to be alone. That memory wasn't funny to me. Not even a little. Someone else got up after him, Leah, I think. She joked about the time I tried edibles at a New Year's party and ended up locked in a bathroom because I thought the hallway was judging me. Another person piled on about how I once canceled a trip last minute because I had a panic attack at the airport. That story got a round of applause. I laughed with everyone else, but inside, I was shrinking. None of these stories were common knowledge. They were personal, private, things I had shared in low moments, thinking I was in a safe place. And now they were punchlines. Nothing was off limits. Not even therapy. Not even mental health stuff. Dudes got more triggers than a minefield, someone shouted from the back, and the room lost it. I scanned the crowd, trying to make eye contact with someone who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. But no one did. They were all enjoying it. Like this was all just part of the fun. No malice. Just, love through laughter, right? I looked at Natalie. She was sitting on the edge of a stool, grinning. She had her phone out, recording. She caught my eye and mouthed, "You good?" I nodded. Lied. That's what you do when the people you trust decide your life is entertainment. You nod. You play along. You smile so big your face starts to ache. And you tell yourself you're being too sensitive, that it's all just jokes, that maybe they're right, maybe you do take yourself too seriously. But I felt something shift in me during that roast. Like watching a party from underwater. I was still in the room, but not really. Still surrounded by people, but weirdly, terrifyingly alone. And then it was Natalie's turn. When Natalie stood up, the room got quieter, not out of respect, exactly, but because she wasn't the kind of person who usually grabbed the spotlight. Everyone leaned in a little. Even James raised his eyebrows like he didn't know what she'd say. She adjusted the mic stand, just a little too high for her, and cleared her throat. "Okay," she said, holding up her drink. "I just wanna say, I love you. Really. You've made my life better in more ways than I can count." The room gave an exaggerated "ah," and I felt myself exhale. Maybe she was going to pivot. Maybe she'd skip the roast and just say something kind. A soft spot in the night. But then she added, "But let's be real, you are kind of a disaster." People laughed. "I mean, the first time I spent the night at your place, you spent 20 minutes apologizing for the creak in your floorboards. Like, are you serious? I thought you were going to cry because your IKEA dresser was missing a screw." More laughter. I smiled again, because I had to. But I felt the air shift. I was back on the defensive, trying to brace for where she was going next. "Oh," she said suddenly, snapping her fingers. "Can I tell the crying story?" I froze. My body actually locked up. I knew exactly which one she meant. "Okay, so we had been seeing each other for a couple of months," she began, and I heard James shout, "Oh no, here we go." Natalie grinned. "We were, doing our thing, and afterwards he just broke down. Like sobbing. Full-on waterworks. And I was like, what did I do? What happened?" Laughter again. Louder this time. He just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I've never felt safe before." And I was like, okay, damn, therapy's working overtime. The room exploded. I heard someone slap the table. A woman choked on her drink. I stood there, in the middle of my own birthday party, listening to the person I loved the most reduce one of the most vulnerable moments of my life into a crowd pleaser. And she was laughing, too. Laughing like it wasn't a betrayal. Like she hadn't looked me in the eye that night and said, "You don't have to apologize for feeling safe with me." I remember how she ran her fingers through my hair, how she whispered that it was beautiful, how she promised I could always be honest with her. Now it was a joke. A fucking joke. She told another story about me texting her from the other room during our first fight. He didn't want to argue face to face, she said, so he just kept sending long paragraphs like we were in some emotional novel. People started calling out lines. "You complete me," someone shouted. "This isn't just about dishes," another laughed. I stopped hearing the words. Everything got quiet inside my head, like someone had turned down the volume. Just muffled sound and the static of my own pulse. I looked at James. He had his head thrown back, mouth open wide. He looked proud. I looked at Natalie. Her eyes were sparkling, cheeks flushed from the wine and attention. She didn't see me. She saw a character. A setup. A man-shaped piñata full of punchlines. I took a long sip of my drink, set it down on the counter behind me, and walked toward the hallway without a word. I passed by a girl in the group who gave me a quick smile, small, sympathetic, but she didn't stop me. No one did. In the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror, palms braced on the sink. I stared at myself for a long time. I didn't even look upset. Just blank, like someone had swapped me out for a mannequin. That's when I knew I couldn't stay. Not another minute. I walked out the back door. No goodbyes. No scene. Just the click of the lock behind me and the cold night air waiting outside. I didn't even feel cold. I didn't go home right away. I got in my car and just sat there for a while, watching the venue's side door from across the street like I was surveilling a crime scene. I kept expecting someone, Natalie, James, anyone, to come out, look around, maybe call my name. But no one did. The music kept playing. The lights inside stayed warm and bright. They were still laughing. I turned off my phone before I even started the engine. Just held the power button and watched the screen go black like I was cutting the last thread that connected me to them. The drive had no destination. I took the highway out of the city, hands loose on the wheel, no music, no GPS. Just road and headlights and that hollow, echoing stillness that comes after something inside you finally breaks. I must have passed 4 or 5 exits before I realized I was still gripping the steering wheel like it was holding me together. At some point, I pulled off onto a random exit and parked in a gas station lot. Didn't get out. Just sat there staring at the empty space in front of me. The silence wasn't comforting, it was brutal. Like everything I'd been trying not to feel all night was sitting in the passenger seat now, watching me fall apart in real time. I kept thinking about Natalie's face. That bright, flushed expression she wore while telling those stories. How she didn't hesitate. How easy it was for her. I remembered how many times she'd told me she loved that I could be vulnerable with her. How she'd called me brave, real, raw. And I realized it had all been ammo. Collected moments. She was stockpiling stories while I was just trying to be known. It wasn't love. It was content. The worst part? I'd told her everything. I'd given her my scars and let her trace them like sacred lines. I'd let her see the softest parts of me, the ones I'd spent most of my life hiding. And she'd wrapped them up in a punchline and fed them to a room full of people. That was the night I stopped confusing closeness for safety. The night I learned that being invited in doesn't mean they won't still cut you open in front of an audience. When I got home, the apartment was dark. I sat on the floor in the living room, phone still off, coat still on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't text anyone. It wasn't grief yet. It was just emptiness. Around 4 in the morning, I got up, showered, and changed the locks. Then I blocked everyone. The group chat. James. Every name I recognized from that party. And last of all, Natalie. I didn't explain. I didn't ask questions. I didn't give them a single line of dialogue to twist into a joke later. I just erased them. One by one. The texts started coming the next afternoon, after they realized I was gone. I didn't see them, not at first. But the notifications popped up in my email. James sent 6 messages in an hour. Natalie left a voicemail, just 30 seconds of her saying my name over and over again like she was hoping I'd answer mid-sentence. Then came the posts. The vague apologies. The Instagram stories. The people tagging me with things like, "Hope you know it was all in good fun, man." One of them even messaged me saying I was being dramatic. They had the audacity to paint me as the one who disappeared without a word. Like they hadn't spent an entire evening dissecting me for sport. They called it a celebration. They said it was all love. But I don't think they know what love is. A few weeks passed. I didn't respond to anyone. I didn't unblock a single number. I got rid of the apartment I shared with Natalie. Moved into a short-term lease across town under a different name on the mailbox. Bought a new phone. Changed jobs. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I was done explaining myself to people who only heard me when I broke. For the first time in my life, silence felt like power. Then one night, maybe 3 weeks after I disappeared, I got a message on my work email. No subject. No signature. Just a single line. You should see what they were saying before the party. Attached was a screenshot. At first, I didn't want to open it. I hovered over the file for a long time, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it wasn't worth it. That it wouldn't change anything. But I clicked anyway. It was a group chat. A private thread labeled the roast team. There were over 50 messages. Jokes drafted. Stories selected. People ranking ideas from too soft to will kill. Natalie's name showed up the most. She was the one who suggested they include my panic attack story. She said it would balance the tone. She even added a laughing emoji after. He needs to learn to laugh at himself anyway, face with tears of joy. One message from her read, don't forget the crying story, it's gold. That'll get the biggest laugh. Another, if he gets upset, we'll just say it's love. Emotional exposure therapy or whatever. James responded, LMAO. He'll either cry again or finally grow a pair. I stared at that line for what felt like hours. She knew exactly what she was doing. They all did. That wasn't a roast. It wasn't spontaneous, or careless, or well-intentioned. It was planned, premeditated. They wrote a script and cast me as the fool. They took everything I gave them, my fears, my breakdowns, my love, and turned it into entertainment. They didn't misunderstand me. They studied me. I don't remember deleting the messages. I must have. They're gone now. But the worst part wasn't what they said. The worst part was how proud they sounded. How sure they were that I'd forgive them after the laughs faded. That I'd come around, thank them for keeping it real. Like they thought this would make me stronger. What it actually did was burn out whatever soft spot I still had for them. I never replied. I didn't reach out. I didn't send a dramatic final text or one last middle finger. I just stopped. Natalie tried again, weeks later. A handwritten note. She must have found my new place through someone at work. She left it taped to my door in a neutral envelope with my name printed neatly on the front. Inside, it just said, I didn't think it would hurt you that much. That was the last straw. She hadn't even apologized. Just admitted she underestimated how deeply she'd cut. Like the problem wasn't the betrayal, it was my reaction to it. I ripped the note in half and threw it in the trash with my keys still in hand. Then I left for a drive I didn't plan, because that's what I do when I need to feel anything other than numb. People talk a lot about closure. About forgiving to heal. But I don't believe in that anymore. Some things you don't get over. Some people show you exactly who they are when they think you'll laugh along. And me? I stopped laughing. Because once you realize they were all watching the same joke, you don't go back to the table. You flip it over, and you walk out for good.